This is the Registered Behavior Technician course presented by Shaza Attar. The course content was created by Shaza Attar and is the property of Autism Therapy and Training, Inc. All rights are reserved. This training program is based on the Behavior Analyst Certification Board 2018 RBT Task List 2nd edition and is designed to meet the 40-hour training requirement for the RBT credential. The program is offered independent of the BACB. Remember, in each class, we will have our active listening, a quiz, and a competency assessment.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our topic on applied behavior analysis. Have you ever been asked the question, what is ABA? Have you ever struggled to answer it? Well, you're not alone. This is a question we ask all new therapists when doing their interview or when we play ABA games at the center. And most people will often struggle answering that question. I usually get a blank stare. You, like many others, probably know what ABA is all about, but explaining it, well, that can be a little bit more challenging. So today I want to explain what ABA is so that you can really understand the science. When you think of science, many things may come to mind. I want you to think of science as a systematic approach for gathering information. It's attempting to understand something thoroughly, with as much detail as possible. You'll hear me speaking of applied behavior analysis in its abbreviated form as ABA. ABA is the study of human behavior, but more specifically, it is the science that focuses on improving human behavior. ABA is looking at socially significant or important behaviors. We want to address behaviors that will impact and improve someone's quality of life. We don't want to change just any behavior. For example, if you're working with an adult with autism who does not know how to cross the street safely versus doing their bed, both may be essential skills to learn, but one is definitely more important than the other. So teaching your client to cross the street safely would be our top priority versus making their bed. Crossing the street safely is a socially significant behavior. In practice, we want to intervene to help improve behaviors. We may be working on teaching new behaviors or reducing problem behaviors. But it's important that we can demonstrate a relationship between the behavior and treatment. By using a systematic approach, we can show that without treatment, the client was unable to cross the street independently. But with a program that was introduced, the client is now able to cross the street successfully and safely. Practitioners will analyze, design, implement, evaluate, and modify social and environmental factors to make socially significant changes in human behavior. To change behavior, we need to look at all the factors that impact that behavior. Why do you open the window? Probably because it's hot in the room, or maybe you want to air something out. Why do you answer the phone? Well, it's probably ringing, and maybe you're expecting an important call. When a behavior analyst or a behavior technician look at their clients' behaviors, they want to understand these factors to better help their client. We do this by direct observation, measurement, and functional assessments to investigate concerns in the environment and manipulate those factors. Imagine I said, Johnny is coming to the center and he begins crying in the lobby. Your mind should be flooded with questions at this time, wondering why, what's triggering the cry, what's changed. We need to observe the behavior, measure it so we can compare it to something later. We can also manipulate things in the environment to see if the behavior would change at all. If I said ABA, you may quickly associate autism with it. However, is ABA only for autism? The answer is no. ABA can be used for a wide range of areas. It is definitely used for early intervention for children diagnosed with autism, but it is also used for criminal behavior, HIV prevention, health and exercise, language acquisition, seatbelt use, animal training, substance abuse, phobias, and even feeding disorders. ABA has been around for some time. We can go back to as early as the 1900s. John B. Watson, a psychologist, argued that the proper subject matter for psychology was not states of mind, but rather observable behaviors. Watson, otherwise known as the father of behaviorism, his famous work included a young child named Albert, who he conditioned to be fearful of rats by pairing them with a loud, scary noise. We need to remember that this research was conducted before a research ethics board panel was created. You can see the importance of ethics and how it has helped shape our field to become more ethical in practice. The experimental analysis of behavior began in 1938 when B.F. Skinner published his first book, The Behavior of Organisms. This book summarized his research that was conducted between 1930 to 1937. Skinner has impacted our field so much and has put so many things into perspective for us as behaviorists. I would really suggest reading some of his work or learning more about Skinner as you get into the field of behavior analysis. We know more about behavior, especially when we compare Ivan Pavlov's work with Skinner's work. Pavlov looked at respondent behaviors. These behaviors occur when the eliciting stimulus is presented. These are involuntary behaviors, so you have no control over them. For example, when a light is directed into our eye, the pupil constricts. You have no control over this behavior. Pavlov is known for classical conditioning. If you're familiar with his work, in 1927 he had a dog salivate when it heard the sound of a bell. How did this happen? Well, he paired food with the sound of a bell, and over time, the sound of the bell became a conditioned stimulus. When the bell rings, food is delivered, and the dog would salivate. When the bell rung without the presentation of the food, the dog still salivated. With classical conditioning, the antecedent, that is, something that occurs before the behavior, triggers the response. So the sound of the bell triggers the salivation. The difference between Pavlov and Skinner is Skinner looked at operant behaviors and operant conditioning. What Skinner found was that operant behaviors are not impacted by preceding stimuli like respondent behaviors, but rather were influenced by what followed the behavior, what we call consequences. For example, Skinner did much of his work with pigeons and rats. Again, if you're familiar with his work, he used what we call the Skinnerian box and discovered types of reinforcement. And he also discovered extinction during his research. As you can see, most researchers would use animals, but it wasn't until 1949 when Fuller worked with an 18-year-old male with profound developmental disability. This young man did not move, and he laid on his back the whole time. Fuller used a syringe filled with warm sugar milk that was injected into the young male's mouth when he moved his right arm. After only 4 sessions, Fuller found that this young man was able to move his right arm into a vertical position. This was huge for them because no one thought that this young man would be able to learn anything. The use of operant conditioning demonstrated here showed how it was able to change one's behavior. Let's do a Scrabble word. The word is Oma, spelled O-M-A. Oma means grandmother in German. Okay, take a deep breath and let's get back into the history. So now let's fast forward to the 1950s. Researchers began gaining an interest in studying the application of behavior analysis on human participants. These experiments were conducted mostly in the setting of a laboratory or clinic. Researchers wanted to see if the basic principles of behavior discovered in the laboratory were applicable to humans as well. Some of these studies included researching typically developing participants as well as participants with developmental disabilities. The preliminary research conducted during this time paved the way into development of applied behavior analysis by creating a sound foundation of evidence surrounding the science of human behavior. In 1959, Alon and Michael studied how frontline staff in a hospital used a variety of techniques to improve the functioning of patients that were diagnosed with psychotic and developmental disabilities. It was very challenging for these early pioneers since controlling and manipulating variables was either unavailable or used incorrectly. Journal editors were reluctant to publish their work since a lot of it was experimental and their methods were different than most research. Regardless of the challenges, researchers faced new discoveries using behavior principles in the field of education came about. Researchers began assessing the use of token reinforcement systems, contingent teacher praise, and attention and program instruction. In 1968, the formal beginning of modern applied behavior analysis began. The Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis began publishing articles from researchers that otherwise would not have been published due to the fact that their research was experimental. 1968 was a major year in behavior analysis, with the start of the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis and the article by Bear, Wolf, and Risley, which outlines the 7 dimensions of ABA. ABA was really shaping up into something extraordinary. Finally, those in the field were seeing the difference and were very excited for its future. Applied behavior analysis is a field that focuses on changing behaviors. An article by Bear, Wolf, and Risley in 1968 described the 7 dimensions of ABA. This is an important article in our field and one that everyone should read. I've attached the link for you, so take time to read the article in its entirety. I think it will add great value to your understanding in ABA. I'll briefly review the article and the 7 dimensions. The first dimension of ABA is applied. This dimension describes the importance of designing interventions that focus on socially significant behaviors for our clients. Socially significant behaviors are those which are important for the client in order to successfully function within their environment. As I had given the example earlier of someone learning to cross the road safely. When designing programs for clients, we need to look at what is important to improve their quality of life and not necessarily what we think is right. When we design programs for our clients, interviewing the parents is a crucial part of understanding what would make things easier at home. For a client that isn't speaking, teaching the client to communicate is going to help the family and improve their quality of life. Learning to communicate will most likely reduce problem behaviors, so parental or guardian involvement is very valuable. If the skill being addressed by an intervention has social significance to the individual and their community, then the intervention fits this component. The second dimension is behavioral. Behaviors must be observable and measurable. To see whether an intervention was effective in changing the behavior or not, we need to clearly define the behavior so that it can be seen and recorded accordingly. The behavior can be measured and we can then see progress over time. I'll discuss behavior and environment in a later class, and I'll highlight how to be sure it's observable and measurable. Analytic. This demonstrates experimental control, identifying a functional relationship between behavior and environment events. By collecting data daily or weekly, it allows us to see whether or not there is a change in the behavior due to the intervention. Remember, in order for us to say that a program or protocol is impactful, we need to show that relationship. That's why it's important for us to use scientific methodologies to approach things systematically. Technological is the use of complete and precisely described procedures. It's the ability for a behavior analyst to replicate a written description of a procedure. use research, for example. If you found something in Java that showed us effective ways to teach interverbals, you would want that written description to be written in a way that could be easily replicated, giving you the same findings. Procedures should include information such as what behavior is being looked at, where is it conducted, how long, what was said, how it's done, and so on. If the intervention is technologically described and those implementing the intervention are trained to correctly implement the procedures, then the likelihood of the intervention being implemented correctly across interventionists is much higher. Effective. Effective is when a treatment is cost-effective, efficient, and results produce significant change in the rate of behavior. We want to see the changes across all environments, not just the one we are in. A family that tells you that they're noticing the child is talking more or they're using the skills that have been taught, then we can say that the treatment is effective. Now, of course, there are many factors to an effective treatment. For example, if a child is enrolled at our center for 6 hours a week, we may find that there is little to no progress. We would need to evaluate why there is limited progress and make adjustments. We may need to increase the hours or change the days. The sixth dimension of ABA is conceptually systematic. That is, procedures are described in terms of basic principles and procedures of the research around behavior analysis, such as extinction, reinforcement, and so on. As an RBT, you'll be running programs and protocols that are designed by your supervisor. As an RBT, you want to know that you're doing ABA. Some things you do, you may not know what it is. If I said to you, I want us to implement a new protocol for Johnny, what you will do is remove a sticker off his sticker board each time he yells. Now, if you're familiar with ABA, you might not say anything to your supervisor but nod and agree, because you know that it's a basic component of ABA known as response cost, which is a punishment procedure. But if you didn't know, how would you know that you're running something within ABA? At the end of the day, you are responsible ethically to ensure that you are working within your competency and within what is scientifically effective. So our job as supervisors is to describe procedures so that RBTs and others know where this information is coming from. Finally, we have generality. This is whether or not the behavior change persists over time and generalizes to other environments. This is important because behavior changes is only significant if it maintains over time, and the individual is able to use the skill in a variety of environments. We want to ensure that the behavior change has occurred across settings, people, and material being used. One of my favorite examples of this is when I started doing home-based therapy. Remember my little guy at the daycare under the rug? Well, after leaving the daycare and working at a center for some time, I decided to do home therapy so that I could complete my master's and have a more flexible schedule. His mom called me and asked if I could work with him because his therapist was leaving him. So I hadn't seen him for about a year, and I was really excited to see how he had progressed and started working with him. I sat in on a session to see how things were going, and I noticed he was answering a variety of questions about colors, shapes, and other items. What I didn't notice, but realized when I started working with him and doing his assessment, was he didn't answer these questions as I thought. He could only answer the questions under very rigid conditions. If I said, "What color is it?" he would answer. But if I said, "Tell me the color," "What color is the ball?" or change the phrase in any way, or even change the material, he couldn't answer me at all. So he hadn't generalized the information he had learned. So when we're designing a program, we want to ensure that it programs for generalization. We want to ensure as instructors that we're using different materials, saying things in different ways, and ensuring that multiple therapists are teaching it. I'll discuss this more during our generalization class. Okay, Let's get into our quiz. I'm going to give you a break from all this information. Good luck. This dimension focuses on changing socially significant behaviors. A. Applied. B. Behavioral. C. Analytic. D. Technological. E. Effective. F. Conceptually systematic. Or G. Generality. And the correct response is A. Applied. What famous article was published in 1968? A. Cooper, Heron, and Heward's article on the 6 dimensions of behavior. B. Bear, Wolf, and Risley's article on the 7 dimensions of ABA. C. James, Frank, and Risley's article on the 8 dimensions of ABA. D. Bear, Cooper, and Risley's article on the 7 dimensions of behavior. And the correct response is B. Bear, Wolf, and Risley's article on the 7 dimensions of ABA. This dimension states that treatment results should show a significant change in the rate of behavior. Is it A. Applied, B. Behavioral, C. Analytic, D. Technological, E. Effective, F. Conceptually systematic, or D. Generality? And the correct response is E. Effective. Who was the first to use behavioral methods on humans? A. Cooper, B. Skinner, C. Fuller, or D. James? And the correct response is C. Fuller. The procedures should be easily replicated if they are A. Applied, B. Behavioral, C. Analytic, D. Technological, E. Effective, F. Conceptually systematic, or G. Generality? And the correct response is D. Technological. What is Pavlov known for? A. Operant conditioning, B. Behavior conditioning, C. Contingencies conditioning, or D. Classical conditioning? And the correct response is D. Classical conditioning. Well done. The child was angry does not meet which of the dimensions discussed by Bear, Wolf, and Risley? A. Applied, B. Behavioral, C. Analytic, D. Technological, E. Effective, F. Conceptually systematic, or G. Generality? And the correct response is B. Behavioral. What is Skinner known for? A. Operant conditioning, B. Behavior conditioning, C. Contingencies conditioning, or D. Classical conditioning? And the correct response is A. Operant conditioning. There is a clear relationship between the behavior and environmental events. Is which dimension of ABA as described by Bear, Wolf, and Risley? A. Applied, B, behavioral, C, analytic, D, technological, E, effective, F, conceptually systematic, or G, generality. And the correct response is C, analytic. You should use a variety of phrases, material, and instructions to meet which of the following? A, applied, B, behavioral, C, analytic, D, technological, E, effective, F, conceptually systematic, or G, generality. And the correct response is G, generality. Way to go. Beowulf and Risley describe the following as ensuring procedures are described using the basic principles and procedures. A, applied, B, behavioral, C, analytic, D, technological, E, effective, F, conceptually systematic, or G, generality. And the correct response is F, conceptually systematic. Way to go. I want to briefly introduce some of the principles and procedures of applied behavior analysis. I want to gradually introduce these concepts so that you feel more comfortable with them as we get into each class. Most of these concepts will have a class that really breaks it down into smaller parts so you really understand the science, but also its use in practice. As we get through our 40 hours of training, these concepts should become easy to understand and you can explain them when needed. So let's jump into it. The first concept I want you to know, and a very important principle of ABA, is reinforcement. This is when a behavior improves over time when something follows that behavior. So a behavior happens, something follows it, then that behavior happens again and again. For example, suppose you wanted your learner to say thank you. You will need to get that behavior to happen first, so you may tell the learner to say thank you and model the correct behavior. So let's suppose the learner copied your behavior and said, thank you. You will now need to reinforce the behavior. Let's say you gave your learner a high five and said, good job. Now suppose this happened again and again, and each time you reinforce that behavior, over time, you should see that that learner is saying thank you independently. This is what we would call the process of reinforcement. The behavior has increased because it accessed a reinforcer. What if you don't reinforce? Then that behavior may never increase and occur independently. Many times therapists, teachers, and parents will ask me, why is their client or child not learning a new skill that they're working on? And most often the client is not getting access to a reinforcing item. Now there may be other reasons, but we'll get into all of that in our reinforcement class. So if you don't reinforce a behavior, that behavior may never increase. The client may not grasp the new skill. Another important ABA principle is punishment. Punishment is a topic that many may debate, but so is reinforcement. The use of any principle or procedure in ABA, if used incorrectly, could result in issues. I'll give you a quick example. Imagine you reinforce your learner every single time when they wrote a letter during their academic work time. After several months, you think maybe your client is relying on this reinforcer, so you decide to take it away. But now your learner isn't doing the work because you realize that they only did the work to get that item. Some may call that bribery. Well, reinforcement when used incorrectly can quickly start looking like bribery. The difference between reinforcement and bribery is, with reinforcement, The item is given after the behavior has happened. With bribery, as Wikipedia states, is the act of giving or receiving something of value in exchange for some kind of influence or action in return. So I won't do my homework until I know I'm going to get ice cream. My behavior will only occur if I know I'm getting something. But that's not how reinforcement works. You do something not knowing whether you're getting something or not. So you do your homework because you have to. But because you did a good job, I'll give you ice cream. This will make more sense once we get into the reinforcement class, but keep this in mind. Punishment, if used incorrectly, can become a major ethical issue. So what is it? Punishment is when an item follows the behavior, decreases that behavior over time. So the behavior occurs, something happens, the behavior decreases over time. For example, suppose you went to your favorite coffee shop, approached the clerk, and ordered your coffee. She suddenly starts yelling at you and telling you to get out. You leave the coffee shop. Are you likely to go back to that coffee shop? Probably not. That aversive situation will decrease your behavior. If you ever heard people talking about ABA in group chats online or people in university classes, they may not say very good things about ABA. I think this really stems back to old times when punishment was used quite a bit and may not have been used appropriately. In 2006, I was called by a family to do home therapy for a little guy. Let's call him Mikey. I remember Mom wanting to do things just right and wanted to ensure she implemented anything I advised her on. I asked her to explain what was going on in therapy currently with his therapist and why there were so many issues around toileting. I quickly learned from his mom that the therapist would make Mikey wash his soiled underwear under cold water when he had a bowel movement accident. I was a bit shocked to hear this. Although this was a punishment procedure and punishment is an accepted principle, there were things that were overlooked, such as the side effects of punishment. So that explains why our field is looked at in a bad way sometimes. So it's important that you learn what punishment is and how it's used appropriately so that you can help reduce these negative outlooks and help people understand it more. Again, we'll get into this when we talk about punishment in our punishment class. Okay, let's stretch and do a Marvel character. This one is Black Widow. Again, it's Black Widow. Okay, did you stretch? All right, we're almost done. Hang in there. Let's talk about extinction. This is another principle of ABA. This is when you no longer reinforce the behavior with the reinforcer it used to get. So the behavior happens, you don't reinforce it, then the behavior gradually decreases. For example, imagine your friend called you every day after work and asked if you could pick them up, and you did day after day. Finally, you think to yourself that you can't do it anymore. So your friend calls you and asks, but then you say no. Like any behavior, it may not suddenly stop. Extinction is interesting because that behavior may actually increase and get really, really bad before it gets better. And we'll talk about this more again in our extinction class. But just remember that extinction decreases behavior. Now, many get confused between punishment and extinction. They both decrease behavior. The difference to note here is that punishment uses something following the behavior to decrease it, while extinction no longer reinforces the behavior. So they're very different in terms of the process used to decrease the behavior. Then we have two procedures of ABA, chaining and shaping. Chaining is when we link smaller behaviors to get to one big behavior. For example, washing your hands has many small behaviors, turning the water on, getting soap, rubbing your hands, and so on. The entire thing is washing hands. Just think of it as a big chain and each link in the chain is a behavior. You need to reinforce each link in order to connect it to the next link and so on. Shaping is similar in a way where you're working towards a terminal end goal, but we use approximations to get to that end goal. You reinforce better and better attempts of that behavior until you get to that goal. For example, if the learner you worked with said "un" for balloon, then the next day they said "loon," you would no longer reinforce "un" because the learner produced something better. You would now reinforce "loon" only. The next time your learner said "baun," again, you would only reinforce that and not "loon" because "baun" is better. Okay, we've come to the end of our class. We have talked about a lot. Let's get into the quiz. Good luck. What is reinforcement? A. Process in which behavior decreases over time. B. Process in which behavior increases over time. C. Process in which a previously reinforced behavior is no longer reinforced. Or D. All of the above. And the correct response is B. Process in which behavior increases over time. What is punishment? A. Process in which behavior decreases over time. B. Process in which behavior increases over time. C. Process in which a previously reinforced behavior is no longer reinforced. Or D. All of the above. And the correct response is A. Process in which behavior decreases over time. Well done. What is extinction? A. Process in which behavior decreases over time. B. Process in which behavior increases over time. C. Process in which a previously reinforced behavior is no longer reinforced. Or D. All of the above. And the correct response is C. Process in which a previously reinforced behavior is no longer reinforced. What is chaining? A. Process in which behaviors decrease over time. B. Process in which successive approximations are reinforced to achieve a terminal goal. C. Process in which behaviors are reinforced and linked together. And the correct response is C. Process in which behaviors are reinforced and linked together. This is the process in which a behavior is no longer reinforced, which decreases the behavior. A. Chaining. B. Reinforcement. C. Extinction. D. Punishment. Or E. None of these. And the correct response is C. Extinction. What is shaping? A. Process in which behavior decreases over time. B. Process in which successive approximations are reinforced to achieve a terminal goal. C. Process in which behaviors are reinforced and linked together. And the correct response is B. Process in which successive approximations are reinforced to achieve a terminal goal. This is the process in which behavior decreases over time. A. Chaining. B. Reinforcement. C. Shaping. D. Punishment. E. None of these. And the correct response is D. Punishment. This is the process in which a terminal goal is achieved by reinforcing approximations of the behavior. A. Chaining. B. Reinforcement. C. Shaping. D. Punishment. E, none of these. And the correct response is C, shaping. This is the process in which behavior increases over time. A, chaining, B, reinforcement, C, shaping, D, punishment, or E, none of these. The correct response is B, reinforcement. Excellent work. My final thoughts. Firstly, great work, everyone. I've covered some important information to help you understand the field a little bit more. But take it from me, there is so much more to learn. These 40 hours will give you the foundation to get started in the field. So take some time in your day to read a book here and there and learn about the history and read some articles that have really shaped our field. Each concept that I've reviewed today will be discussed in more depth. I will give you examples so you can understand how they are applied in our field and in practice. Until the next time, study hard and keep learning.